Thank you for your introduction. And I'm delighted to be here. And actually, I'm very excited to see this, the conference. So much is happening here, and Michelle really, is working. I mean, really clear this program is broadening the CP, and I think that is just fabulous because, CP permeates everything, but sometimes I think our community tends to focus on the small part when, CP is really all over. So I think that's the right way to go about CP, and I'm going to talk about computational sustainability, and, I'm actually going to, recently I start my talks by thanking profoundly NSF. I was talking to Jean Freuder, and it's not easy sometimes to find good funding for sustainability. In the US, there's funding for all kinds of things, a lot from DOD, and sustainability is not really that easy. But NSF has been very generous, and we got a first grant on computational sustainability. These expeditions that are large, $10 million grant. And with that, we were able to, nucleate the field, and we were able also to identify some three key research directions for maximal impact, both in terms of computer science and sustainability. And thanks to that, we decided to apply for another expedition. And basically our point was, look, this is really a new area for computer science, and if we want to really grow the field, we need to large-scale projects, and we need to really have a bit of critical mass, and hopefully they would go for another expedition, and we did get a second expedition. And the goal of this expedition is really to create a large-scale network. Everybody is invited to join us. I hope you get involved with CampusNet. And so I'm very thankful to NSF for that. So, when I was planning this tutorial, I was not sure actually what I would talk about because it's not obvious. But, often people ask me, how did you get involved, and how did you start this field, etc. So what I want to do today, I'm going to talk a little bit, the big vision for computational sustainability, but then I will actually give some examples. And my idea is to really tell a story. It's going to actually be biased towards, the projects at Cornell, but hopefully you will see how CP really has shaped dramatically, part of our research projects. So I will talk about different areas, and you will see actually some of you may know my background. You will see how, important CP, CPAIOR, and obviously AAAI, etc., has been in terms of shaping, our contribution to this field. And I purposely decided to focus on, focus on, areas that relate to CP. So this, this tutorial is really about, connections to CP and how CP actually helps and play the key role in some of our projects. So what is the big vision for computational sustainability? Basically, this is a new interdisciplinary field that aims to advance computational methods for sustainable development. The notion of sustainable development was introduced in '87 by the Brundtland Commission, actually led by a woman, and basically sustainability development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So basically, and this is very important, we need to think about the future, actually in terms of computationally speaking, dynamics play a key role, and planning in terms of the future also is important. More important is the fact that sustainability is not just about climate or the environment, but in fact sustainability encompasses balancing all these factors, environment, economic, and societal needs, which in the end, actually, the goal of sustainability and sustainable development is human well-being. But because of all these factors, sustainability problems are actually quite challenging. And in fact, they are, computationally speaking, unique and in scale and complexity. Often we are dealing with complex systems, and we want to predict and manage these systems. We collect lots of data. Typically we are dealing with data characterized by multiple scales, temporal and geographic, uncertainty, and also and in general very complex dynamics. So clearly we have many computational challenges, and in fact, in addition to the computational challenge, for us to get involved in this area, it's a challenge also how to, develop these interdisciplinary projects. And also, we need, for the computer science or for computational sustainability, for us to sustain it, we also need critical mass in terms of the field. And because of that, for example, that's why, even though my area is more, I focus on some projects, I really think that for us to get critical mass, we really need to bring together different areas, and indeed sustainability involves all kinds of problems ranging from conservation, from smart grids, from smart cities, etc. And you will see that it's important for us to identify the critical computational problems across these different areas, and that has been our position. And, but to do this, we really need critical mass. That's why we propose this large-scale network. Keep in mind, this is funded by NSF, so NSF funds the US, even though we can have collaborators, but obviously the main PIs have to be US people. So here you see this is a large network. In the US, it involves 12 US academic institutions. You may recognize some of the computer science here, but then we also have collaborators. We have lots of collaborators, Gov and NGOs, and then we actually have lots of international collaborators, and some of them are actually here. And I couldn't put all the pictures because this network has a large number of people, and you will see that soon. But more important, for us to be able to have impact, we really need to team up with, centers of excellence who actually, organizations that will provide the sustainability knowledge and infrastructure. This network we are teaming up with organizations such as the Nature Conservancy, for example, in Ecuador with the Secretary of Environment in Ecuador. We have obviously the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, but many organizations that are key to give us the expertise and know-how in terms of sustainability problems. So we have a large network, over 150 actually faculty, students, and collaborators. And some of the pictures here you again recognize, and we have actually international collaborators. I see Michaela there with the different hairstyles now, and other collaborators. So, this network really, we have problems across three core sustainability themes: conservation and biodiversity, balancing socioeconomic needs, for example, poverty, etc., and also renewable energy and discovery of new sustainable materials. So, often people say, how come, and in fact, even, sometimes when you submit proposals, the reviewers immediately say, well, how come you are going to do all of this? Well, and my point has been, and I'm very strong about this, that we actually, on purpose, create all these interdisciplinary problems, because if we want to create a coherent and cohesive computer science subfield, it is really critical that we go deep in terms of cross-cutting core computational problems. So the idea is we are going to identify cross-cutting problems across these different problems and especially, study these problems in depth. So, and you will see what I mean by this. We focus in terms of computational thrusts. We focus on 3 key areas, and one is constraint optimization, constraint programming optimization, dynamical models and simulation, big data and machine learning. You can't do anything today without big data, and multi-agent systems, citizen science, and crowdsourcing. So these are our computational themes. I already mentioned the sustainability themes. And what I really want to emphasize, and this has been the most exciting part, because we are studying these problems and we are really looking at real-world applications and we want to solve the real-world problems, often the most exciting research for computer science actually comes at the intersection of areas where, basically we are pushing the boundaries in terms of each area, but then it is at the intersection that we have very novel research. And in fact, I will go into technical details. I have a talk where it is an amazing example how we are bringing together constraint reasoning optimization, machine learning, and citizen science and crowdsourcing. It has been incredible how this domain is so rich that really is leading us to fundamentally novel ways of looking at these problems. Because we actually, an analogy that often I give to people is, I see computational sustainability a bit like Bell Labs. You probably have heard of Bell Labs, an amazing, research lab, and, a lot computer science and other areas were advanced dramatically because they needed to solve a real problem. How to manipulate and transmit information. This really pushed the field. I believe we can push the field of computer science by addressing these problems and trying to solve them, but really also emphasizing computational questions. So I'm going to now start with an example, and I'm picking this example because you will see a lot of people will recognize where I'm coming from. I've worked on this since I was a little girl, a long time ago. But you will see by having computational thinking, we go from designing fertilizers experiments to really very powerful techniques for searching, counting, and sampling. And this is an example of thinking outside the box and really going beyond the particular application. So again, an example of how you can, by addressing a real problem, really advance the state of the art of computer science. So I kind of said that, and you see, it is also, this problem is obviously also important from the sustainability point of view, but indeed it's also important for us in terms of computer science, because by studying this problem, we were able to come up with very interesting techniques. So this is about fertilizers. agriculture in the U.S. is a small, has a small percentage of the GDP, 1.2%, yet it contributes 8% to greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, a lot of this is due to fertilizers. 90% of the agriculture nitrogen losses come from fertilizers. And so there's, you know, fertilizers have been amazing in terms of increasing our productivity, but often, you know, for example, in developed countries, particularly in the US, farmers use like 10 times more the amount they need. For example, in Africa, they could use more fertilizers. But because of that, it's creating, you know, these dead zones where, you know, the excess of fertilizers is creating these dead zones and with very negative implications for the environment. So I'm working with a group at Cornell, and basically they want to develop management tools for, you know, predicting the amount of fertilizers that they should use in a very rigorous way. I'm not going to talk about this problem because it is quite complex and large, but I'm going to talk about a little problem that, in fact, this was one of the first problems that got me, I start thinking about computational sustainability, and you will see right away what I'm talking about. Well, latent squares. You know, I have done a lot of work on, as I said, and I was a long time ago. And latent squares actually I used to design experiments. It turns out that for designing experiments for fertilizers, you need very special latent squares. They have to be balanced, meaning that all treatments have, for example, the treatments here are colors. You see that this pair has a distance of 1 in the first row, a distance of 4 in the second, etc. So it has a total distance of 14 in this row, and all the pairs have the same distance, so they all are balanced. So basically, I mean, it doesn't really matter what it means. It just means that all pairs of treatments are going to be subject to the same circumstances in terms of the geometry of the field, or are going to, so that we can compare them. Well, you know, when I was given this problem, and I've studied this problem, as you know, and the structure of latent squares is very interesting, etc. It appears in several problems, but, you know, it turns out that for these problems, when we first tried to solve them, in fact, I was saying, no problem, we can easily generate spatially balanced latent squares for any other order, or they wanted to till about 30, and I thought we could do it trivially. Well, because of the constraints, we couldn't. We could solve them up to order 6, meaning a 6 by 6, that's what we could do in terms of finding the optimal solution for this. In the meantime, I know there actually, I see Pascal did some work using local search, but no matter what, this is a very, very challenging problem. And we needed to solve it. So how do we go about solving it? Well, you know, I remember with Meinhof, we would look at solutions and we start seeing some structure. For example, a lot of the solutions were symmetric. So an obvious thing that we start thinking was, well, why don't we impose additional structures? Say, okay, I want a spatially balanced latent sphere that is also symmetric. And now, by imposing symmetry, we now could go to order 9. And then we kept pushing, and for example, here we could produce a solution of order 18 by assuming that it would be a combination. Basically, I would have like a dual representation where I could compose a big one from this. Again, the details don't matter, but basically we impose addition properties and we could generate bigger squares. Does it make any sense? Make sense to you? Okay. So, and, well, when we actually were about to submit a paper to CP, actually, I was working with Meinhof, and Meinhof is super efficient, and, you know, the idea was, let's write about this fertilizer problem. But then we thought, and I thought, well, we should actually think about what we did here, and because it is this idea, always think the big picture and how you can generalize and learn from an experiment, but you are not a computer science if you solve just a little problem. No, you need to think in general terms. And that's when we came up with this idea of streamline reasoning. The idea is you are doing a search, but you pose additional properties so that you can, you know, your search space is going to be reduced. And if the property fails, then you backtrack. Does it make sense? So we call this streamlining reasoning. And this, you know, several people then would say, and then we submitted a paper, but we actually found other problems, little problems, maybe magic squares, etc., applying the same reasoning to solve it, and it was the idea of streamlining reasoning. And, you know, I remember some, you know, one reaction that would say, well, you just came up with this for this problem. But I'm a big believer that by thinking of streamlining reason, that really helped us, and you will see what comes next. And in fact, by doing this streamlined reasoning, we could actually go to order 35. This is by assuming that I can permute the columns of a particular square. This is just by permutation of columns. I can actually produce a bigger one. But more important, you know, this allowed us to think really in big terms. And what do I mean by big terms? Because we had this notion, oh, I did streamlining reasoning. It was, you know, a good idea. We could solve big problems, but not very satisfactory in the sense it was highly domain dependent. We were thinking of our particular problem and the types of constraints that we were going to impose. Well, so the next question is, can we do streamlined reasoning in an independent way, independently of my domain? So now I have a problem. How can we apply the same reasoning without thinking specific constraints for this domain? And, you know, that led us to what we call XOR streamlining reasoning. And basically the idea was based on a very interesting result by Valiant and Vassarini. They showed that, you know, unique SAT is hard, and they showed by using these random parity constraints. And so basically we thought, oh, maybe we can use this, and I'll talk a little bit about that, these parity constraints to do automatic streamlining for us. But again, you see, this only happened because we had created this idea of streamlining reasoning. And so that's, I'm going to give you just an intuition of what we mean by streamlining, XOR streamlining. So imagine I have a big, like here, a big room, and I want to count the number of people in the room. Well, you know, I would have to count it, and I could do this in different ways, like one by one, or I could do a branch and bound, where I would find a quick way of identifying like areas with no solutions for pruning, or I could do by sampling, etc. But we can also do it in another way. We can do this where basically I'm going to give everybody a coin, and then I'm going to say everybody starts with hands up. You toss a coin. If it heads, you keep the hand up. If it tails, you bring it down. And we do several rounds. So at the end, we will have one hand up. So now we can estimate how many people we have by 2 to the number of rounds. Does it make sense? So this is exactly how can we do this idea with streamlining and with parity constraints. But for you to see the analogy, the auditorium is our search space. The seats are the truth assignments. The occupied seats are satisfying assignments. And bring head down is to put an additional constraint that is going to reduce the search space. Do you see the analogy with the streamlining? And so basically, that's where we use these XOR parity constraints that can be, for example, encoded in using CNF or another language. And as long as I have the probability that a truth assignment A satisfies my XOR constraint with probability 0.5, and also this mutually independence, I can actually, produce interesting results with actually some guarantees. I'm not going to go into the details, but basically with this XOR streamlining, we were able to automatically find solutions, but we were also able to count, and this has led to tremendous research in terms of sampling. For example, we had this paper at AAAI, and I'm actually going to say it was the best paper, not to brag about it, but to tell you that an idea that came from fertilizers ended up becoming best paper at AAAI. By then, we were not really talking about fertilizers. We were using this general technology. But then, we actually, with Willem, we worked on the same idea for constraint programming and mixed integer programming. My student Stefano also developed this idea for probabilistic inference with, very successful with several papers at NIPS, etc., etc. And actually, my student Yeshang is now developing it for stochastic optimization. So this started with solving a problem for fertilizers. And so this is just an example. And I want to emphasize that we often really use these problems to give us ideas because we really need to solve them, but then always generalize and try to see the big picture. So let me now go to another interesting area, that is the area of human computation. This is now a hot area in computer science, and we are going to go back to the spatially balanced latent squares. And my question is the problem actually hard, finding spatially balanced latent squares? Well, we actually produced, we were able to solve up to order 35, but frankly, my intuition was that this problem is not computationally hard. We just don't know the construction, and it's like, finding a set of orthogonal squares took 200 years, but in the end, that problem is, there are constructions. So I always believed there was a construction for this. And frankly, we worked a little bit on that, but we couldn't find it, and we were not approaching the problem properly because we were looking at callers. But then a smart student, Ronan, decided to actually look at it from a different perspective. And basically, here the idea is let's try to get human insights coupled with a solver to try to find these regularities and discover a construction for this problem. Do you understand what I mean by a construction? It is a polynomial, something that runs in polynomial time and very easy, and you will see. So basically, we thought, can we use a visualization tool for this? And so Ronan actually created this visualizer where basically he would impose constraints to do streamlining, and then basically would generate all the solutions. For example, the symmetry, or that the fact that you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 5, so some interesting patterns. He would look at them and see them, and then make that as a constraint and see what happens. Does it make sense? Okay. By doing that, he conjectured, by looking at the solutions, he could conjecture streamliners and then select the streamliners and try to perform search and select solutions. Well, by doing this, analyzing solutions, he was able to actually discover this very interesting. Do you see a pattern? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So he could actually see a pattern and could produce a solution that is, a polynomial time construction, very trivial, so. But this is only possible for orders 2n plus 1 when 2n plus 1 is a prime number. So, but with this, he was able to actually find a construction. And another type of construction where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. So we can discover the construction he did, and it's encapsulated in that algorithm. So basically, now the streamlining really allowed us to actually discover a construction. So that was quite exciting. And I leave you as a homework assignment, find constructions for other spatially balanced latent squares for order greater than 35 when 2n plus 1 is non-prime. We don't know how to do this. It's still an open problem. But I believe there is, or we need to prove. But, this is an example, and I use this example to show you that, starting with fertilizers, we actually develop interesting techniques for streamlining reasoning, and also for human computation-based streamlined reasoning. And you will see how this is going to be very useful. So, and now I'm going to go to a completely different domain, and this is a domain for actually, it is combinatorial materials discovery. Basically, we work with Caltech and actually Cornell in search of solar fuels. And basically, back in 2010, there was a report by the Department of Energy where they basically state that the existing energy approaches are not enough to secure our future. We need new materials. And so we are teaming up with Caltech, and actually Cornell has a very strong group, and that's, this is another component, that always team up, go and attack a problem if you have access to the experts. So we happen to have that. That's why we are working in terms of materials discovery. Just to give you a little intuition how it is, they actually literally mix up different elements. So here there's tantalum, rhodium, and palladium. They have guns, and they deposit on a silicon wafer. And then, here I'm representing the system in terms of a ternary system to highlight the composition in proportions. And every point here is a material with a given crystal structure. But we don't know what the crystal structure is. And we would like to know that. That is as important as finding the structure of DNA. So they want to know that. But the only thing they can do is to take X-rays using the synchrotron, and that's what we get. So our problem is now we have different X-ray diffraction patterns, and we want to infer the different crystal structures of the elements. this is a very hard problem because often the structures can get mixed, so unmixing is very hard. Another way, here we have different samples where we take the X-rays and we want to identify these different regions. So formally the problem is, in fact, by the way, the first paper we wrote about this was submitted to CP and it was accepted. So I was very happy, and where we defined this problem and we actually characterize the complexity of this problem. Basically, we are given these X-ray diffraction patterns, and there are additional physical properties, constraints that we need to impose, and our goal is to output these different regions where each region is a pure phase or a combination of pure phases. And this problem is computationally hard. So this is from the CP. We had a CP encoding, but we could solve problems with 10 samples at most. Then we actually, and indeed, when we have data, we looked at kernel. I mean, if you look at this problem, it is kind of a clustering problem. So we use clustering techniques like spectral clustering techniques, and the clustering techniques helped us have the big picture, but still, in fact, we also use dynamic time warping, which basically, the spectrograms, the peaks shift, so you want to align them. If you do, bioinformatics, you may have seen that. And with the dynamic time warping, we could do a little better. But still, the machine learning was really poor at enforcing the physical hard constraints. By the way, this has been a big thing of our research. And in fact, we are working with domains where machine learning doesn't work, because typically, like in a scientific domain like this, you need to really impose the constraints of your domain. You need to impose the prior knowledge and the physics of the domains. So that has been a big thing for us, and I think we can really advance the state of the art by doing this. So this is to solve this problem. Then we bring together different technologies, including, for example, satisfiability. And here is again, I mean, I'm not going to go into details. I think it's better to give you the big picture. Using a set module theory encoding, basically this is set extended with other theories to deal with the reason about numbers, we actually could solve this problem much better than CP. You see here, we have the different phases that correspond to those areas. So basically, we have phase alpha, beta, gamma, etc. This is what the state of the art in terms of machine learning NMF approach would give you, so really poor at retrieving the signal. And now we could do it much, much better. But, the problem is this would take forever, still takes forever. So we were not happy with that. So, and you see, you always, Jean also told me, you make your own luck, and I agree. And another word that I love is serendipity. That's my favorite word, because, thinking about everything we've done, we thought, why don't we see if humans can help to solve this problem? And can we actually use humans to try to identify hidden structure in these problems? And, that is, I see Stefan there, that will take me to another area where we worked, and this was the notion of backdoors. And again, I'm going to go back to our good old little Latin square problem, where here you have an instance that's actually a very easy instance, and yet if you solve it with a randomized solver, you will see that the same instance, these were solved very quickly, these are still running. And we wanted to understand how come there's such a variance in performance for this, the same algorithm on the same instance. It's just a randomized algorithm. You know, you see this took more than, and I don't remember the big number of backtracks. And in fact, I have an instance running, it has been running for like a month, but I was going to show you, but I think there's no time for that. Anyway, but this led us to basically this notion that the runtime distributions are heavy tailed, and you know there has been a lot of work showing these heavy tails, and you know, dinosaurs also have heavy tails. I remember I did this. My son, who was, I don't know, at the time maybe 8 or 10, he loved that. He's now going to college, so this was a while back, but this was in honor of my son. But basically what you see here, when you have a heavy tail distribution, it can run forever, but if you restart, you see how the tail drops dramatically. This is an indication when you have a log-log plot, there's a line that means heavy tail. That's when it drops, the heavy tail disappears. So how can we explain this huge variance? You know, the same instance sometimes has very short runs or very long runs. To try to explain that, we came up, you know, after several models, etc. I'm not going to go into the details, but the notion of backdoors. Basically, the idea is, you know, these are small sets of variables that encapsulate the combinatorics of your problem. So if you are lucky, and if you find these little nuggets, you can instantiate them, and then your problem is solved just with propagation, and complexity goes away. And we formally defined the notion of backdoors, and as I said, you know, this work also led to other work, and in fact, Stefan has done a lot of incredible work, you know, in terms of backdoors. And here is a visualization of a constraint graph with several variables, and once you instantiate a few backdoors, you know, the complexity goes away, and after 12 variables, you are pretty much, you know, have a very simple problem. Here is an example where 3 variables are enough to show that this problem has no solution. So, why am I even talking about this? Well, because we thought, maybe humans could help us visualize vectors. And, you know, there has been a ton of work in terms of vectors, but so far we have no idea in terms of the semantics of vectors, how to find the vectors. So we are hoping that maybe we can find the vectors in some way by visualizing the problem, because humans, you know, we are very good. We have a very advanced visualization system that we can, you know, identify things very quickly. The same way when you pack your suitcase, this is a NP-hard problem, yet you know that, you know, first you put the big items, the books and things, and at the end you put the little socks, etc. So, you know, you have, you know, intuitions of structure. So could we also do something here? So here is our problem, and basically what I'm showing you, these are different samples. This is the spectrogram, but now we also represent the spectrogram in terms of a heat map. You don't need to know anything about material discovery. In fact, that's our point. We want a child to help us without knowing a thing about materials discovery. But clearly, you see some patterns there, correct? I mean, I have not explained what kind of pattern I'm looking for, but now, basically, we actually developed a human computation framework for boosting combinatorial solvers, and this was an example. If you see here, basically, we want to find, you know, patterns, and just for you to see, we gave this to high school students or to Amazon, the Mechanical Turk, and everybody could pretty much say, oh, all these things are a similar pattern. We do give like a 20-minute tutorial saying what we mean by patterns. That means that, for example, here, you see here, the blogs start and end at the same, blogs have the same length, they can have different colors, etc. So very simple notions of what it means for them to look alike. And people could immediately mark this for us. Yet the computer could not solve this because the computer thinks there are peaks here. Basically the peaks are stacked here in this heat map, and it's trying to explain this, but this is clear noise from the wafer. So humans don't even see this, so they just mark this, and de facto these are backdoors for us. And by solving this, we could actually solve a solution, solve an instance that could not be solved by the machine or by humans. So this was very interesting, and in the meantime, we actually developed a structure, and in fact, we use an example of a puzzle, because sometimes this problem may be a little difficult to explain, but how humans can help with the visual skills to solve problems, and in fact, our scientific question is, can humans still help solve combinatorial problems? And here, this is a good example of that. So for you to see, the SAT solver goes from 13 hours to 1,000 seconds, just a few minutes when we provide minimal input from the humans. So this was really, really exciting. And for the first time, we were able to, find the semantics of backdoor. So this was exciting for us. More exciting was, in fact, we are writing this paper, so don't go and spread, because this is still research that we are about actually to publish, we hope. And this is an example of a real-world instance where we were able to identify the structure, basically the patterns, and with this human-machine algorithm, in fact, you see that is the slice, that is this binary slice that the humans are so good at identifying it, and our collaborators actually found, due to our algorithms where we characterize the search space very rigorous, including the shift, etc., these are details, they were able to identify a new catalyst for methanol oxidation that is platinum-free. So very exciting. So, this has been a very interesting area. And again, I want to emphasize that for us, I love this domain. This is, why do I love it? Because it defies the state-of-the-art of machine learning. Machine learning doesn't work. You need to think about the constraints, etc. So we are actually having a good impact, but you see, again, think big. We are solving this problem, but in the end, what we are solving is this. You can think of this factor decomposition or matrix factorization or clustering, etc., with very intricate constraints. So that's how we have been approaching this problem. But again, we need to generalize. I still have 10 minutes, correct? Okay. And, this is our problem that I talked about. Well, we also have, we are working with a project called the Elephant Listening Project. And here we monitor elephant populations by analyzing the recordings. In fact, I love this problem too, because my son loves animals, and he wanted to do, biology, etc., etc. And then he volunteered for this project. And basically what they do is they have people mark the calls, and if you look, the signature is very clear. There's a call. So again, you can be taught how to mark the elephant calls. But we want, and And then he actually, but you know, it can be very boring because you listen to hours and maybe there's a 2-minute call. So I explained to my son that, well, you know, we can automate this. And in fact, he knew about that project. I told him, you know, these projects, computationally speaking, are essentially the same. He said, what? Elephants and materials? And yes, they are essentially the same, because this is what we call a source separation problem. We have a signal, and we want to decompose the signal into the different components. Here we want to separate the elephant calls from the frog calls, from etc. There we want to separate the cubic crystal structure from the cubic, from the tetragonal, etc. In the end, they are very similar. In fact, this is even related to topic modeling. You may have heard of topic modeling. Basically, you have a signal and you want to decompose it into the different parts. And in fact, my students work on these two problems and many others that are similar to this. And this is a very important component of our program. We actually, you will see, think about these problems as cross-cutting computational themes, and we actually use these subway lines to highlight this. This was obviously, I worked very hard on this plot to make a point to NSF that all this comes together. But it's not just, you know, for NSF. I believe in this, and in fact, you know, my students typically work on a variety of domains where, you know, you see here you see the line, the pattern decomposition, and all the problems: elephant call detection, flight call detection, high throughput materials structure, the problem that I talked about, electricity used in disaggregation, etc. So this is a line where there are many problems, different applications, but there's a common cross-cutting computational theme. And I'm a big believer in this if we want to build a coherent computational science around this. And so, you know, this is important. I'm going to be very brief. In fact, I'm giving a talk next where I will talk in detail about this domain. And here is basically how we use citizen science and collecting, again, another citizen science crowdsourcing project. We use the data. We have a lot of citizen science who provide a ton of data, observations. Humans are still by far the best sensors to identify birds, and we combine these to produce these very nice distributions of the species. And in fact, now we have a good understanding how the species are distributed. Because of that, we are actually working with the Nature Conservancy to target, you know, to create habitat in California for the birds. Basically, they do these reverse auctions. They pay farmers, or the farmers bid to keep water in the fields, coinciding with the bird migration, to provide habitat for the birds. So a very, way more inexpensive than just buying the land. And you know, this is just possible because now they actually have created with this a lot of additional habitat. And this is only possible because now we have these very advanced models for species distribution, and we can also have these target auctions to provide habitats. Just, you know, you may think the same way we have the citizen science for birds, we have a similar project in Africa, and you know, Africa is very poorly sensed. This project is for us to get more images, for us to be able to build better maps. I had to mention this. Stefano, who, you know, my student, is now at Stanford, and he just got a paper in Science about poverty mapping. That is actually a project related to this project. And I will be talking, this is an amazing project, and I will be talking about this in a few minutes. And I will give you the details of this, and you will see how we bring together machine learning, optimization, game theory, and games, game theory and real games. So, and you know, this problem also, I'm now trying to go fast, relates to another one that seems to be very unrelated. I'll give you more details in the next session. So, just I'll mention another big area where we have, in fact, we started here. I mean, this was also one of our first projects, building wildlife corridors. And the idea, you want to connect reserves so that you allow movement. And basically, you know, this is really a graph theoretical problem. And, you know, interestingly, very hard. We could not solve it, and then we were actually able to identify, you know, a particular case. If you are trying to find mean cost corridors, this is just a Steiner tree problem. And if you use that to reason, we actually also studied the complexity of this problem and different encodings. Bistra, you met Bistra, she worked on this, and actually we were able to come up with solutions where we were able to go from hundreds of millions to tens of millions. So, you know, but you see, there's a lot of streamlining, optimization, etc., etc. A key point, again, is this notion that we, on one hand, we are importing ideas from computer science, but what is exciting is, you know, the sustainability problems really pose new challenges that typically the computer science problems don't solve, like in networks. So then this is leading us to come up with a variety of new problems to address the particular aspects of sustainability. So we are actually starting this major project in Ecuador. It's very challenging because there's a lot of social and ecological aspects. So let me wrap up. This has been an incredible productive area. I really recommend that you get involved in computational sustainability. I mean, we have produced lots of papers in computer science, but also general science. We have created, you know, a dynamic, all kinds of conference that tracks, etc. But also, you know, we have our students. We have placed several students in tenure track positions. For example, Bistra is at Georgia Tech. I already mentioned Stefan is at Stanford. Dan Sheldon is at UMass. But, you know, I understand that it's challenging to get this started. So we have this CompSysNet. I hope you get involved with us. We have all kinds of activities and projects. This is very rewarding because you inject ideas into sustainability, but believe me, we gain a lot in terms of computer science, in terms of new problems, new formulations. We actually also learn a lot from the smart scientists. That also helps develop new approaches to, and obviously with societal impact. There's a tremendous community, and please keep in touch. We are going to start soon a CompSys virtual seminar. Anybody can be involved. We have, you know, mailing lists, blogs, etc. You can even blog your computational sustainability related paper in our blog. And, you know, I'm very happy to see that there are several papers here, including the best paper, actually, is even in computation sustainability, and there's another best paper that is related to computation sustainability. There's a session, and actually there's an invited talk. And so, you know, in summary, you know, this computational sustainability permeates several areas, and I really believe it has a great potential of advancing the state of the art of computer science, but at the same time with unique societal benefits. Well, thank you so much.